A single strike thrown in a crowded gym was enough to bring a legendary martial arts master to his knees. Sienna Valoré, a woman whose name commanded respect across 3 continents, a 5-time world champion who had trained Olympic athletes and Hollywood action stars, found herself frozen in the center of her own dojo, unable to breathe. The strike came from a janitor's teenage son, a skinny kid in borrowed gym clothes who had never taken a formal lesson in his life. But it wasn't the precision of the technique that stopped Sienna's heart. It was the exact movement, the signature form of a fighting style that only one other person had ever mastered, a woman Sienna hadn't seen in 15 years, a woman the world believed had abandoned martial arts in disgrace. Why did a champion who had faced the world's deadliest fighters crumble at the sight of a teenager's punch? The answer lies in a story of stolen mastery, a broken sisterhood, and a secret that was about to shatter everything Sienna Valoré had built. The Crimson Phoenix Martial Arts Academy occupied 3 floors of a restored Art Deco building in the heart of Seattle's Capitol Hill district. The main training hall on the 2nd floor was a cathedral of discipline and achievement. Exposed brick walls were lined with championship belts from Tokyo, Sao Paulo, and Amsterdam. Framed magazine covers showed Sienna Valoré in various fighting stances: Black Belt Magazine, Fighters Weekly, Women's Combat Sports Quarterly. In every image, her expression was the same: fierce, focused, untouchable. The space itself was immaculate. Bamboo flooring imported from Kyoto gleamed under recessed lighting. One entire wall was floor-to-ceiling mirrors, allowing students to observe and correct their forms. Traditional weapons, staffs, nunchaku, training swords, were displayed in custom glass cases like museum pieces. The air always carried a faint scent of sandalwood incense and the sharp, clean smell of athletic discipline. This wasn't just a gym. It was a brand. A lifestyle. A promise that anyone who walked through those doors and paid the premium membership fees would be transformed from ordinary to extraordinary. The waiting list for Sienna's personal instruction was 18 months long. People flew in from other countries just for weekend seminars. The Crimson Phoenix wasn't a place where you learned to fight. It was where you became a warrior. And Sienna Valoré was the high priestess of this temple. At 49 years old, she remained a devastating presence. Her body was carved from years of relentless training, lean muscle over a frame that stood 5'9". Her dark hair, now streaked with silver that she wore like war paint, was always pulled back in an intricate braided knot that never came loose, no matter how intense the sparring. Her eyes were the color of dark amber, sharp and assessing, missing nothing. When she moved, it was with the fluid grace of water and the sudden violence of lightning. She had built this empire from nothing. A scholarship kid from the rough side of Tacoma, she'd fought her way through a male-dominated sport, faced down sponsors who wanted her to smile more and hit less, and created a fighting system that bore her name. The Valoré method was taught in 60 gyms across North America now, all licensed and profitable. She had book deals, a streaming fitness platform, and a line of high-end athletic wear sold in boutiques from Vancouver to San Diego. Every single dollar, every ounce of respect, every championship title, she had earned it. Or so everyone believed. Saturday morning session. The advanced class on this particular Saturday morning was full, 30 students, all black or brown belts, all moving through kata sequences with synchronized precision. Sienna walked among them like a general inspecting troops, her footsteps silent despite the hard floor. She didn't need to raise her voice. A glance was enough to correct a sloppy stance. A slight shake of her head could make a 200-pound man adjust his breathing pattern. Her senior instructor, Takeshi Yamamoto, a former Japanese national team member she'd recruited 5 years ago, led the warm-up drills. His commands were crisp, his standards unforgiving. This was what people paid for: excellence without compromise. "Pair up for controlled sparring," Takeshi announced in his accented English. "Focus on deflection techniques. Strikes at 50% power, maximum." The students moved efficiently into pairs, their expensive GIs rustling softly. These weren't hobbyists. They were lawyers, tech executives, doctors, entrepreneurs, People who could afford the $400 monthly membership and had the discipline to show up 4 times a week at 6 a.m. Sienna observed from the edge of the mat, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. This was her kingdom. Every person in this room had been transformed by her system, her philosophy, her. A commotion near the entrance broke her concentration. Rosa Delgado, the academy's evening janitorial worker, was standing near the front desk, speaking in rapid, apologetic Spanish to the receptionist, Jenna. Rosa's hands twisted nervously around the strap of her worn canvas bag. Beside her stood a teenage boy, maybe 16, 17 at most, drowning in an oversized hoodie and jeans with frayed hems. His sneakers had holes near the toes. Sienna felt a flash of irritation cut through her calm. This was a professional training environment, not a social services facility. She moved toward the front desk with purposeful strides. "Is there a problem?" Rosa jumped slightly, her eyes widening. "Miss Valoré, I am so sorry. There was a gas leak at my son's school, they sent everyone home. My sister who usually watches him, she had to work. I have no one else, and I cannot miss my shift. I lose this job, It's fine," Sienna said curtly, already calculating the minimal disruption. Rosa was reliable, showed up on time, never complained about the long hours required to keep 3 floors spotless. Good cleaning staff was impossible to find. "He can wait in the break room." Quietly. Thank you so much, miss." But before Rosa could finish, a voice rang out from the training floor. "Hey, Sienna. We're short one person for the rotation drills." The voice belonged to Kimberly Ashford, a corporate attorney who'd been training at Crimson Phoenix for 3 years. She was good, technically proficient, competitive, and unfortunately, sometimes cruel in the casual way that very privileged people often are. She gestured toward Rosa's son with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What about the kid? Give him a taste of what real martial arts looks like. Could be inspiring for him." Several students chuckled. A few others looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Sienna should have shut it down immediately. Should have reminded Kimberly that the Crimson Phoenix was built on respect and discipline, not humiliation. But she was distracted, already mentally reviewing the afternoon's private sessions with a pair of MMA prospects from Portland. And if she was honest with herself, there was a part of her, a small, ugly part she didn't like to acknowledge, that believed people were divided into 2 categories, those who belonged in places like this, and those who didn't. "1 round," Sienna said with a dismissive wave. "Light contact only. Treat it as a teaching moment." Rosa's face drained of color. "No, please, Mateo doesn't, he's never." "It's okay, Mama," the boy said softly. His voice was quiet but steady, with none of the bravado teenage boys usually carried. "I can do it." Rosa looked at her son with an expression Sienna couldn't quite read, fear mixed with something else. Something almost like recognition. But she gave a small, reluctant nod and stepped back. The boy, Mateo, walked onto the mat with hesitant steps, his hands shoved deep in his hoodie pockets. Next to Kimberly in her pristine white GI with her black belt tied perfectly at her waist, he looked like he'd wandered in from a different planet. Students began gathering around, some already pulling out phones. This was content, the kind of inspiring transformation moment they could post on social media. #Crimson Phoenix, #Real Martial Arts, #Inspiration. "Don't be scared," Kimberly said loudly, her tone dripping with condescension. "Just try to touch me once. Anywhere. Think of it like a game." Takashi shot Sienna a questioning look. He didn't approve, she could see it in the tightness around his eyes. But he said nothing. Loyalty meant trusting her judgment, even when he disagreed. Mateo stood in the center of the mat, looking small and out of place. He was painfully thin, all sharp angles and 2 long limbs. His dark hair fell across his eyes. His posture was uncertain, shoulders slightly hunched. "Come on, kid," Kimberly said, bouncing lightly on her toes. She held her hands low and open, a gesture of supreme confidence bordering on mockery. One shot. Make it count. The gym had gone quiet except for the hum of the ventilation system and the occasional beep of someone's fitness tracker. 30 pairs of eyes watched. Phones recorded. And then something shifted. It was subtle at first, so subtle that most people in the room missed it entirely. But Sienna saw it. She saw the moment Mateo's weight settled differently into his stance, the way his shoulders dropped and aligned, the way his breathing changed from shallow and nervous to deep and centered. The boy pulled his hands from his pockets and let them hang at his sides, natural and loose. And his feet. Sienna's entire body went rigid. His feet had moved into a stance she knew better than her own heartbeat. A stance that wasn't part of any traditional style, wasn't taught in any dojo except one. A stance that she and only one other person had ever developed, refined, perfected together in a garage-turned-training hall 2 decades ago. The Ghost Willow stance. The foundation of the Valoré method. Before Sienna could speak, before she could move, before she could process what her eyes were telling her, Mateo moved. It wasn't fast in the showy, theatrical way that impressed crowds. It was fast in the way that reality is fast, unavoidable, inevitable, already happening before you realize it's begun. The technique was called agua cortante, the cutting water. It had a ridiculous name, poetic and strange, because the woman who'd invented it had loved poetry and strange metaphors. The movement was deceptively simple, a 45-degree step to redirect the opponent's center, a yielding palm to guide their momentum past you, and a rising back fist that emerged from the blind spot like a knife from still water. Mateo executed it with textbook perfection. His fist stopped precisely 1 inch from Kimberly's temple, close enough that she felt the air displacement, close enough that several students gasped. Perfect control. Perfect distance. Perfect form. Kimberly stumbled backward, her mouth open in shock. She hadn't even registered the movement until it was over. The room erupted in murmurs. Phones captured the moment from 6 different angles. Someone whispered, "Holy shit, did you see that?" But Sienna heard none of it. The world had contracted to a single point, this boy, this impossible boy, performing a technique that should not exist in his muscle memory. A technique that belonged to a woman named Luz Delgado. Luz. Oh God. Luz. The walls seemed to close in. The championship belts and magazine covers and imported bamboo floors, all of it became meaningless wallpaper. Sienna's hands began to tremble, a fine tremor that started in her fingers and spread up her arms. Her breathing became shallow, rapid, the breathing of someone drowning on dry land. 20 years. She had spent 20 years building walls around that name, burying it under achievement after achievement, drowning it in success and noise and the relentless forward momentum of her career. And now here was this boy, this janitor's son, casually demolishing those walls with a single movement. Where her voice came out as a broken whisper, unrecognizable even to herself. She cleared her throat and tried again, but it came out too loud, too sharp, edged with something that made every person in the room freeze. Where did you learn that? Mateo looked confused, the teenage awkwardness returning to his posture. He glanced toward his mother, who had gone pale as death. Learn what, ma'am? I just moved. My mom used to show me things when I was little. She said they were from your mother. Sienna's words cut through the air like a whip crack. Her amber eyes locked onto Rosa Delgado with sudden, terrible focus. Your mother's full name. What is it? The silence in the gym was absolute. Even the ventilation system seemed to have stopped humming. Rosa stood frozen near the entrance, her hand clutched over her heart. Tears had begun streaming down her face, silent tears that carved tracks through her makeup. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. Rosa Valentina Delgado, she whispered. But you knew me as Luz. Luz Delgado. Before I changed it. Before I had to disappear. The name hit Sienna like a physical blow to the chest. Her knees buckled slightly, and she had to lock them to stay upright. Luz. Not dead. Not gone. Not erased. Here. She had been here the entire time. cleaning Sienna's floors, emptying Sienna's trash, polishing the mirrors that reflected Sienna's championship belts won using techniques that Luz had co-created. Walking these halls invisible, watching the woman who had stolen everything build an empire on their shared work. "Everyone out," Sienna rasped, her voice unrecognizable. "Class dismissed. Now. Get out." "Sienna, we still have 20 minutes, Takashi began, concern clear in his voice. "Get out." The roar came from somewhere primal, somewhere she didn't know existed inside herself. Sienna Valoré never lost control. Never raised her voice. Never showed anything but perfect, ice-cold composure. The students scattered like frightened birds. Kimberly grabbed her bag and fled. Takashi ushered people toward the exit, shooting worried glances back at his mentor. Within 90 seconds, the massive training hall was empty except for 3 people. Sienna stood in the center of the mat, surrounded by her achievements, her empire, her carefully constructed lies. Luz, Rosa, whatever she called herself now, had her arm around Mateo, already moving toward the door. "We're leaving," Rosa said, her voice shaking but steady. "Mateo, come on. Get your things." "Wait." Sienna's voice was broken, a shadow of its usual authority. "Please. How is this possible? I thought you were dead?" Rosa's laugh was bitter, sharp as broken glass. "No. Just erased. Just forgotten. Just left with nothing while you took everything we built together and put only your name on it." The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fire. "Rosa, Luz, I didn't." "Don't," Rosa snapped, her tears still falling but her spine straight with dignity. "Don't you dare. You got your shock. You got to see that I survived. That's more than you deserve. We'll be gone in 5 minutes. You'll never see us again." She guided Mateo toward the door, but the boy looked back, his young face full of confusion and curiosity. "Mom, who is she? How does she know you?" Rosa didn't answer. She just kept moving, pushing her son gently but firmly toward the exit. "Mom, wait, did she know you when you used to compete? Is she?" "Mateo, please," Rosa whispered, her voice breaking. "Not now. Not here. Just trust me." They disappeared through the door, leaving Sienna alone. She stood in the center of her empty gym, this temple she had built to her own greatness, and felt it all crumble to dust. Her legs finally gave out, and she sank to her knees on the bamboo floor she'd imported from Japan, surrounded by championship belts she'd won using techniques she'd stolen, beneath magazine covers that showed a woman who didn't really exist. Luz Delgado wasn't just a name from her past. Luz was the foundation, the hidden, erased foundation, of everything Sienna Valoré had become. They had created the system together in a garage gym in Tacoma 20 years ago, 2 broke young women who believed they could revolutionize martial arts. They had been partners. Friends. Sisters in everything but blood. And when the first big opportunity came, when the sponsorship money appeared, when the book deal materialized, when the chance to go mainstream required a single face, a single name, a marketable brand, Sienna had made a choice. She had chosen herself. Only herself. She had signed contracts that listed her as sole creator. She had given interviews that never mentioned Luz. She had watched Luz's protests turn to silence. And when Luz finally left, broken and bitter, Sienna had told herself it was for the best. That Luz didn't have what it took. That the system needed one voice, one vision, one name. She had told herself so many lies over the years that they had become a kind of truth. That Luz had been a junior partner. That the really revolutionary techniques were Sienna's innovations. That she had done what she had to do to bring their work to the world. But seeing Luz's son, Mateo, perform agua cortante with such perfect form, such natural grace, it shattered every lie. Because that technique had been Luz's masterpiece. Luz had developed it, refined it, named it. Sienna had only learned it, packaged it, sold it. The ghost hadn't just returned. She had been here all along, invisible in plain sight, watching everything. And now her son, a boy who had learned these techniques as bedtime stories and kitchen lessons, had walked into Sienna's temple and thrown a single perfect strike that threatened to bring the entire empire crashing down. Sienna Valoré remained on her knees for 20 minutes, alone in her empty gym, surrounded by 20 years of stolen glory. Her phone buzzed with texts from concerned students. Her smartwatch tracked her elevated heart rate with clinical precision. The afternoon sun moved across the floor in geometric patterns. But she noticed none of it. Because for the first time in 2 decades, she was forced to confront a truth she had buried so deep she'd almost convinced herself it wasn't real. Everything she had become was built on a betrayal. And the woman she had betrayed had just returned to collect what was owed. Sienna didn't leave the gym until well past midnight. She sat in her private office on the 3rd floor, surrounded by contracts and awards and photographs of herself with celebrities and politicians, and felt like a stranger in her own life. The bottle of expensive Japanese whiskey she kept for special occasions sat open on her desk, but she hadn't touched it. No amount of alcohol could numb what she was feeling. Her phone had been ringing all evening. Takeshi called 3 times, worried. Her business manager called about next week's seminar bookings. 2 students texted asking if she was okay. She ignored them all. Instead, she pulled up something she hadn't looked at in 15 years, a dusty cardboard box from the back of her storage closet labeled Tacoma 2009 to 2010. Inside were relics from another life. Photographs of 2 young women in a garage gym with concrete floors and mismatched equipment. Handwritten notebooks filled with technique diagrams and training philosophies. A cracked old phone with text messages she'd never deleted. And there, at the bottom, a single document that made her hands shake, the original partnership agreement she and Luz had signed, promising to split everything 50-50. Revenue. Credit. Decision-making. Everything. She had violated every word of it. Sienna stared at a photograph taken at their first small tournament victory. She was 27 in the picture, Luz was 25. They had their arms around each other, holding a cheap plastic trophy, grinning like they'd won the lottery. They looked so young. So happy. So impossibly naive about what success would cost. The memory of that day was vivid. They had celebrated with $5 pizza and cheap beer, planning their future in that cramped garage that smelled of sweat and dreams. Luz had been sketching out a new defensive sequence on a napkin while Sienna calculated how many students they'd need to afford real equipment. They had been unstoppable together, Luz's creative genius combined with Sienna's business acumen and marketing savvy. "I'm sorry," Sienna whispered to the photograph, but the words felt hollow. Sorry didn't rebuild what she destroyed. Sorry didn't give Luz back 15 years of recognition, of opportunities, of the life she should have had. By the time dawn broke over Seattle, casting pale gray light through her office windows, Sienna had made a decision. She couldn't undo the past, but she could stop running from it. She needed to find Luz, Rosa, whatever she called herself now. She needed to face the truth she'd been burying for 2 decades. But before she could act, someone else was already unraveling her carefully constructed lies. The investigator. Malcolm Reeves was a freelance sports journalist who specialized in exposés. He'd made his name 5 years ago with a piece that exposed performance-enhancing drug use in Olympic Taekwondo. Since then, he'd become the person athletes and sports organizations feared, thorough, relentless, and utterly immune to intimidation. He'd been at the Crimson Phoenix that Saturday morning, filming B-roll footage for a documentary segment on women breaking barriers in martial arts. His camera had caught everything, the mocking invitation to Mateo, the boy's impossibly perfect strike, and most importantly, Sienna Valoré's complete psychological collapse. Malcolm had watched the footage a dozen times. That reaction didn't make sense. Elite martial artists didn't crumble at the sight of good technique from a teenager. Something deeper was happening. Something hidden. He started digging. Within 48 hours, he'd found the original incorporation records showing 2 founders, Sienna Valoré and Luz V. Delgado, and the amended paperwork 8 months later where Luz's name simply vanished. He found old forum posts asking whatever happened to Luz Delgado. He found a grainy YouTube video from 2010 titled Delgado Valoré Method Demonstration, 2 women moving as equal partners through techniques the world now knew as exclusively Sienna's. Then he found Marcus Webb, a former student willing to talk. Luz was the genius, Marcus told him over the phone. Sienna was brilliant too, incredible teacher, natural leader. But Luz created the techniques. She saw martial arts like no one else. Sienna took Luz's art and made it marketable, teachable. They needed each other. Then some big sponsorship came up around 2010. The sponsor wanted a single face, someone marketable. And Luz just disappeared. We all knew something ugly had happened, but Sienna had lawyers by then. Nobody wanted to ask questions. Malcolm had his story. But he needed the final piece, he needed Luz Delgado herself. It took 2 days, but he found her working as Rosa Delgado for Emerald City Cleaning Services. And the real kicker, she'd been cleaning Crimson Phoenix for 6 months. Luz Delgado had been scrubbing the floors of the gym built on her stolen work while Sienna Valoré never even recognized her. Malcolm picked up his phone and left a message that would detonate Sienna's world. Ms. Valoré, this is Malcolm Reeves from Athletic Truth magazine. I'm running a feature story about the true origins of the Valoré method and the contributions of Luz Delgado. I have documentation, video evidence, and testimony. You have 48 hours to respond before publication. When Sienna heard that message Tuesday morning, her coffee cup slipped from her hands and shattered on her kitchen floor. The anonymous gestures. While Malcolm investigated, Sienna moved in desperate, clumsy attempts at restitution. She couldn't approach Rosa directly, not yet, but she could try to ease the burden she'd helped create. On Monday, Rosa received a call from Harborview Medical Center. Mateo's outstanding medical bill of $4,800, a debt she'd been paying off at $50 per month, had been paid in full by an anonymous charitable donation. Anonymous donation, Rosa repeated slowly, suspicion and relief warring in her chest. Just days after the incident at Crimson Phoenix. It had to be Sienna. 2 days later came the scholarship letter. Mateo had been selected for the Phoenix Rising Scholarship for underprivileged youth in athletics, full tuition, books, and living expenses for 4 years. Funded by an anonymous philanthropic foundation. Rosa read the letter 3 times, her hands shaking. This wasn't charity. This was guilt money. Blood money. Sienna trying to buy her way out of 15 years of theft with anonymous checks. We can't accept this, Rosa told Mateo that evening. Why not? Her son's face was confused, hopeful. Mom, I could actually finish school. Study engineering like I wanted. It's from her. From Sienna. She's trying to buy us off. Maybe she's trying to make things right, Mateo said quietly, with wisdom beyond his years. Rosa didn't have an answer for that. The final intervention came Friday. Rosa's supervisor informed her that Sienna had requested she be permanently reassigned away from Crimson Phoenix. She said she understands it must be difficult for you to work there and wants to respect your boundaries. Rosa stood in that fluorescent-lit hallway surrounded by mops and cleaning supplies and felt something crack inside her chest. Sienna was trying. In her clumsy, privileged way, she was trying. It wasn't enough. It could never be enough. But it was more than Rosa had expected. That night, Rosa pulled out her own box of memories. At the bottom was a friendship bracelet Sienna had made her during a tournament trip to San Francisco, back when they were partners who laughed together and believed they'd conquer the world side by side. Rosa held the faded bracelet and let herself cry for the first time in 15 years. Not just for what had been stolen, but for what they'd both lost, a friendship, a partnership, a shared dream sacrificed to ambition and fear. She didn't forgive Sienna. But for the first time, she wondered, what would it look like if she tried? The confrontation. Sienna went to Rosa's apartment on Thursday evening, her heart hammering. She climbed to Unit 3C and knocked with trembling hands. Rosa opened the door. Up close, Sienna could see every change 15 years had carved into her former partner's face. Lines around her eyes. Gray in her hair. Hands rough from cleaning chemicals. But those fierce, intelligent eyes were exactly the same. "What do you want, Sienna?" "To talk. Please. Just 5 minutes. You've had 20 years to talk." "Mom, let her in," Mateo's voice called from inside. "I want to hear this." Rosa hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment was small but immaculate. A futon couch, tiny kitchen table, walls covered with Mateo's certificates. On one shelf, old martial arts trophies, cheap plastic ones, polished to a shine. Evidence of a strangled career. They sat at the kitchen table, 20 years of betrayal heavy between them. "I'm sorry," Sienna began, and Rosa laughed bitterly. "That's it? 20 years, and you lead with 'I'm sorry'? I don't know what else to say. I betrayed you. I stole our work and claimed it as mine. I destroyed your career while building mine on the ruins. I had lawyers threaten you into silence. I erased you from history while she looked around the tiny apartment. While you cleaned floors to survive. Our floors. The gym built on techniques you created. Say it," Rosa demanded. "Say what you really did." Sienna met her eyes. "I stole your life. Your future. Your name and work and legacy. I let you disappear into poverty while I became rich and famous. I'm a thief and a coward, and I've hated myself every day for 20 years, but not enough to do the right thing until I was forced to." Mateo spoke into the silence. "Mom never told me. I knew she competed, but..." He looked at his mother with new understanding. "You invented those techniques. They're yours." "Mine and Sienna's," Rosa said softly. "We were partners once. We called it the Delgado Valoré method. Equal names. Equal credit." "What happened?" Mateo asked. Sienna took a shaky breath. "A sponsorship opportunity. They wanted a single face, someone marketable. I told myself it was just business, that I'd bring Luz back later. But those were lies. I was greedy and scared. When lawyers drew up contracts with only my name, I signed them. When Luz confronted me, I had them threaten her with lawsuits she couldn't afford. She forced me out of my own creation," Rosa continued, her voice steady and factual. "Sent cease and desist letters when I tried to teach our techniques. No gym would hire me, everyone thought I was stealing from her. I couldn't fight back. I had Mateo to feed. So I disappeared. Changed my name. Took whatever work I could find. And watched from the shadows while she became everything we were supposed to become together." The crushing silence that followed was finally broken by Sienna. "There's a journalist. Malcolm Reeves. He's found everything, the partnership documents, old videos. He's publishing in 48 hours whether I cooperate or not." She pulled papers from her bag with shaking hands. "But I want to tell the truth myself. I've had my attorney draw these up. 50% ownership of Crimson Phoenix, what you should have had all along. And a check for retroactive profit sharing. 15 years. It's $1.8 million. Rosa stared at the papers and check as if they might vanish. Mateo gasped. "I want to hold a press conference tomorrow," Sienna continued. "Before Malcolm publishes. Admit everything publicly. Rename the system the Delgado Valoré method. Restore your name to everything. Equal credit. Equal partnership. Like we promised 20 years ago." Rosa's hands trembled as tears streamed down her face. "Why now? Why not when I was begging you? When I was losing my apartment? When Mateo was 7 and we couldn't afford his medication? Because I was a coward then, and I'm still a coward now," Sienna said simply. "I'm not doing this because I'm brave. I'm doing it because I can't live with what I've become. Because I saw your son throw a perfect agua cortante and realized your legacy survived anyway, passed down in kitchen lessons. You won, lose. Your work lived on even when I tried to kill it. Rosa wiped her tears with the back of her hand, that same defiant gesture from 20 years ago. I should hate you. You should. I do hate you. But I also... Her voice cracked. I also missed you. Isn't that pathetic? Sienna took Rosa's work-worn hands. I missed you too. Every day. I'm not asking for forgiveness. But I'm asking for a chance to make this right. However long it takes. Mateo spoke, his young voice cutting through the emotion. Mom taught me martial arts isn't about destroying your opponent. It's about balance, restoration, making things whole. Maybe this is the same thing. Rosa looked at her son, then at Sienna, the woman who'd betrayed her but also been her best friend, her sister, her partner in a dream bigger than both of them. Okay, Rosa said quietly. We try. Not because I forgive you, I don't, not yet. But because I'm tired of being erased. And because I want Mateo to see that sometimes the hardest thing isn't victory. It's choosing to trust again after you've been destroyed. Together, then, Sienna said through her tears. Together, Rosa agreed. Equal partners. Equal credit. Equal everything. The press conference. 2 days later, Sienna Valoré stood before 50 journalists in Crimson Phoenix's main hall. Beside her stood Rosa Delgado in professional clothes Sienna had bought her, looking terrified and defiant. Takeshi watched from the back, arms crossed. Malcolm Reeves sat in front, recorder running. Mateo stood in the very back, watching his mother step into the light. My name is Sienna Valoré, she began, voice steady despite trembling hands. And I have built my career on a lie. The Valoré method was not created by me alone. It was developed in partnership with Rosa Delgado, who has been systematically erased from the history of her own creation. Cameras flashed. The room erupted in murmurs. Sienna detailed everything, the partnership, the betrayal, the cover-up. She held nothing back. As of today, I'm transferring 50% ownership of Crimson Phoenix to Rosa Delgado. I'm issuing retroactive profit sharing for 15 years. And I'm renaming our system the Delgado Valoré method, what it should have always been called. Rosa stepped forward, voice quiet but clear. I don't do this for revenge. I do this for my son, and for everyone taught to believe only certain people deserve credit for their work. Sienna and I were partners. Now we will be partners again, equals, as we should have been from the beginning. The press conference lasted 2 hours. By the time it ended, Sienna's reputation was shattered. Students canceled. Sponsors withdrew. But something else happened too. Stories emerged from other industries, other partnerships where one person had been erased. The conversation shifted from individual guilt to systemic examination of how success is built on invisible labor. And through it all, 2 women stood together, united by truth instead of divided by lies. 6 months later. The building now read Delgado Valoré Combat Institute. The walls featured photographs of both founders, young versions from their garage gym and new professional photos side by side. Membership had dropped 40% initially but was climbing. People were curious about the true story, the complete system taught by both creators. Rosa had moved to a real apartment with 2 bedrooms and windows that didn't rattle. Mateo trained formally now, and under both women's instruction, he was devastating. Sienna had stepped back from celebrity. She taught classes, developed curriculum, and for the first time in 20 years felt like she was doing honest work. The women weren't friends again, not yet, maybe never. Trust wasn't rebuilt in months. But they were partners again. That was a start. On a quiet Tuesday evening after the last class, they sat reviewing expansion plans for a second location. I got another interview request, Rosa mentioned. That podcast featuring women in sports. You should do it, Sienna said. We should do it, Rosa corrected. Together. That's the whole point. Sienna looked at her former friend, former enemy, current partner. Not quite peace, but the possibility of it. Together, she agreed. Mateo appeared in the doorway, sweaty from practice. "Mom, Sienna, we perfected the variation on agua cortante. Want to see?" Both women smiled, the first genuine smile they'd shared in 20 years. "Show us," they said in unison. As they watched Rosa's son demonstrate a technique born from their partnership, refined through pain, and reborn through truth, both women understood that justice wasn't about punishment. It was about restoration. Taking what was broken and, piece by painful piece, building it back into something whole. The ghost hadn't come for revenge. She had come for recognition. And that was the most powerful reckoning of all.